It's story time.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. That's how it begins. Welcome to Life's Work Yoga. Welcome to Story Time. I'm Kimberlyn, and I'm here in the coaching library here at Life's Work Yoga Studio. And I wanted to talk today just a little bit about something that I'm still kind of digesting, still kind of working through, in all honesty. But it's about this idea of citizenship. What do I mean? Well, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. That's how it begins. Countless mornings I have recited these words as a child in various schools across the country. We placed our hands on our hearts and recited the words in unison. Not always very articulate, not always even necessarily clear of what the words meant. But no matter where my family lived, from coast to coast, the pledge was part of my schooling. A daily ritual of community and association. As a child, I looked forward to every national holiday, not just the ones that came with a day off from school, but especially those that included special celebrations and community events used to retell the stories of our nation's founding and commemorate the lives of the heroes that built it. Next Monday is one of these holidays, Columbus Day. Now, my favorite holiday of national pride was actually the 1976 100-year celebration of the Constitution and the formation of this nation. Okay, just a little math check. 1976 is 200 years after 1776, the birth of the United States. So, my apologies for my math. We were living in South Dakota at the time, and what I remember is going to this community festival. And what sticks out the most from that day of celebration was trying to figure out what 100 years meant. I can remember that. And getting to throw a cow patty, which was essentially kind of a shot put toss, kind of a field day event for the community. Now, a cow patty, for those of you who don't know, is basically a dehydrated or a dried up poop left by a cow, right, in the pasture. These were collected, harvested, and transported to the fair, in which case then we grabbed them and threw them. I mean, what is that about? How does that commemorate our nation's birth? I have no idea, but I do remember thinking it was a whole lot of fun. But when I think about next Monday and the national holiday of Columbus Day, there's a bitter taste in my mouth. And even the alternative Indigenous Peoples Day doesn't really do enough to heal the wounds of this perpetuated narrative. My son, my third child, is a sophomore in high school. And in his school, they recite the pledge over the school's intercom system. So I asked him, what is that like for you? And he said that some students join in the recitation. He does not. Some stand, others do not. And in a nutshell, he has an option that I did not, to participate or not to participate. How much of that is relative to his gender, to the age, meaning it's been a few years since I stood in high school. But in his own words, he says, I think America is cool and all. I just don't like all the words in the pledge. I just don't like all the words. I get it. The truth is, I would willingly stand and recite the pledge today. I love ritual. I enjoy just about any kind of communal experience, and I've always felt a strong sense of allegiance to this nation. And I agree with my son. It's hard to rectify all of the words within the Pledge of Allegiance and to affirm the narrative contained within the pledge of our nation. In other words, it's hard to make peace with the story and the heroes who wrote the story of how this nation was built. As a new kid frequently, moving numerous times to new towns and new schools and new states across the nation while I was growing up, I desperately wanted to belong. And the Pledge of Allegiance was one of those things that was consistent between schools. So I could show up, recite the pledge, and feel a little more like I belonged. I knew how to participate. But so much of those early years in my upbringing and in my identity development were about finding ways to be included, to fit in hopes of really belonging. In fact, we moved so often that I got really good at reinventing myself with each new community and then assessing to see where I could best contribute. In fact, I would portray myself just a little bit different. And that's natural, that's normal, it's part of evolving into our own sense of self. But when all of your feedback is based on what is around you as opposed to what is within you, chances are good you're going to start presenting yourself more in line with a performance rather than an authentic expression. And that's what I got really good at doing. I got really good at fitting in. I got really good at playing the role of what was needed, at least from my observations. I wanted to belong, not just to my community of classmates, not just to my nation, but I wanted to belong in my being, to have an alignment between who I was on the inside and who I was in community. But I didn't yet know this concept of alignment. Now, I've always thought about citizenship as belonging to something bigger than myself. But citizenship to me was twofold. It was both the allegiance to a community or a nation and the protection, the privilege, the belongingness that was then the result of that allegiance. And in some ways, my imagination of what it meant to belong, of what it meant to be included, was always greater than my reality. I convinced myself that I belonged because we stood together in the same room and recited the same words of this Pledge of Allegiance. And now I can see how much disparity there is, not just in understanding the pledge, the words that comprise the pledge, but to what are we pledging? And maybe perhaps, what are we pledging against and for? So, in light of this upcoming holiday, how will you celebrate this nation, its building, its rebuilding, its community, and its sense of belonging for all of our citizens and all who reside in its boundaries, in its borders, who love the intention of freedom, of liberty, prosperity, and community. Whether you use the practice of yoga or not in your day-to-day living, I want to invite you to consider aligning your intention on how you define your belongingness, not by who is excluded, by the ways in which instead we can extend and open our arms for inclusion, so that perhaps we can come a little more in alignment with the intention, not just of our founding fathers, but the intention of our nation in its purest, in its most hopeful, in its most ideal expression of the principles contained within the Pledge of Allegiance, within the Constitution, and with the hearts of all of our citizens. The heart being the place where fear does not dictate our actions, our decisions, our behaviors, and certainly should not dictate our laws. It's from this place of the heart that I still long for belonging within my own being, within my family, within my community, and within our nation. Join me in this practice of cultivating compassion and authentic belonging. Let us pledge not just to the history of our nation, but to the rebirth of our community in wholeness and in love. Thanks for letting me share these stories and invite you into a deeper discussion of Indigenous People Day, Columbus Day. What are we celebrating, and whose story are we retelling? Can we involve a broader perspective to get closer and closer to truth, based in compassion and love, based in the union, the community? May you be well. Take care. Namaste.
My apologies for my math. I still remember that 200, 100, it was bigger than my mind could wrap my head around to think about life 200 years ago.